Welcome. We'll get started shortly. Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. There are no polling questions or attendance checks. Instead, you will demonstrate your knowledge by taking a brief multiple-choice quiz using the Earmark app. Visit earmark.app in your web browser. You can also download the mobile app by scanning the QR code on the screen. Log in, or if you're new, create your free account. Be sure to use a valid email address because that's where we'll send your course completion certificates. From the home screen, scroll down to find the course. You can also tap the magnifying glass icon to search for the course. Tap on the course artwork, then the Enroll button. On the Course tab, you'll find the recording and quiz questions. Complete the quiz to earn your CPE certificate. It takes us a few days to create the course on the app, so if you are attending this session live, please wait a few days. We'll email you a link to the course when it is ready. If you have questions or need help, email us at support@earmarkcpe.com. And now, on to the event. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Earmark Expo. I'm Blake Oliver. It's time to buckle up because we are going to take the latest accounting tech for a test drive. Here's how it works. We're going to floor it with a live demo of a game-changing app. David, Leary, and I are going to be in the driver's seat, putting this app through its paces and asking the tough questions every accountant wants the answers to. And guess what? You're along for the ride. We want you, our live audience, to help us navigate. Please ask questions, put those in the comments, and we will highlight those for Srikar to answer. This is your chance to see cutting-edge accounting tech in action, get your questions answered in real time, and gain insights that could transform your practice. So take a seat and let's roll with today's Earmark Expo.
So Blake, back in the day, a lot of our listeners of the podcast know I did tech support for QuickBooks. And I used to love doing tech support for nonprofits. And the reason why is when you're doing fund accounting in QuickBooks, you had to utilize 100% of your QuickBooks skills and 100% of your reporting skills. And in a weird way, I got to show off a little bit on those calls. Or even, by the time you do things in person, we got to a point sometimes. But in the end, it was just a hack of multiple bank accounts with sub-accounts, with asset accounts, with sub-accounts and clash tracking and budgets, and then constant general journal entries to move funds to their proper homes. But I feel like today's Expo, we might be seeing an app that QuickBooks users have been waiting 20 plus years for. How was nonprofit in the Xero world, Blake, or at your firm back in the day?
I have a very distinct memory of struggling with this as well. With Xero, we used, what do they call it, tracking categories in Xero. But one of the big problems was that we couldn't enforce a tracking category on every transaction. So every month when I did the close, I would have to go back and run a report and make sure that all of these untracked transactions were assigned to the correct tracking category so we could track by fund, by department. Getting the reporting right was hard. Like you said, it required a lot of review adjustments to do it. And I was doing this for like one of my clients was the Downtown Business Improvement District in Los Angeles. So this was a big, important organization that was helping to revitalize downtown LA at the time. So I'm really eager to hear from our presenter today, Srikar Chinam, the CEO and co-founder of KarmaSuite. And yeah, I'd love to get a bit of understanding of like, Srikar, why did you decide to tackle this problem of nonprofit accounting in QuickBooks?
Totally. First of all, nice to meet you all, and thank you for having me. I'm Srikar. I'm the CEO and co-founder of KarmaSuite. I used to be a product manager on the QuickBooks payments team, and one of the features I built was automated bank reconciliation, or auto match, in short, for all the payments processed by QuickBooks payments. So if you were using QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Payments, as your bank data came in, we would automatically match it to the invoices in QuickBooks, and that saved over 30 million clicks per year across all our customer base. So, and as with my mission of making payments more effortless, I came across how, also learned how challenging nonprofits accounting can be, particularly around grants management, and how their revenue is restricted, and how QuickBooks doesn't really help a lot with managing these restricted grants, whether it's tracking them, like am I spending them fast enough before they expire, or allocating which expense goes to which grant based on the restrictions of each grant, reporting in formats that donors understand or my internal program stakeholders understand, forecasting my funding gaps so I can make sure I'm fundraising where gaps are versus just align based on strategy. So came across all of these pain points, dug in more, and was like, there has to be something here, and was very surprised to find that there was absolutely nothing.
So tell us about KarmaSuite. How do you solve these challenges for accountants?
Yeah, I think it might be worth spending a minute or so on the challenges itself. So if you can pull up that slide,
you got
essentially there are three big challenges that nonprofits face, and a lot of accountants that help nonprofits face as well. It's first is the labor intensive part of managing grants. And this is where the manual allocations or gathering data in custom formats for grant reporting, which I'll show you in a bit through the demo, and how nuanced that is. Just grant contract details not being in one place. Massive issue number one. The second is, how do you use your funds, and the suboptimal use of funds being a pain point. So like fire drills to spend fast is super common in a lot of nonprofits. Like, oh my God, we have 2 months left. I have 200K in supplies. How do we spend this really fast? Whether I'm doing reclasses or trying to figure out how to spend this money really fast. And program teams often overspend, underspend due to the lack of transparency or just mistakes, because most of the people who are allocating these expenses to grants are not fully aware of all the grant restrictions and all the expense context. And so this results in a huge suboptimal use of funds, where I've spoken to nonprofits that given money back to the donors because they didn't spend the money in time from a definition standpoint, but technically they just couldn't show it by allocating the right expenses to the right grants, which is crazy because they need those funds. And the last piece is just unclear financial future. It's so hard to forecast your funding gap excess by program and by expense category. So in nonprofit world, you cannot just do revenue minus expense equals my profit or loss. And the reason is because your revenue is restricted and might not line up exactly with how your expenses you plan to spend are. So you have to figure out what are all my future expenses, what is all my current and future funding, and then manually allocate all your future expenses to your future grants and say, this is where I'm going to be left with excess money on this grant in this particular category, and this is where I am underfunded, and this is where my fundraising team should go raise. And if you don't do this, fundraising teams fly blind, and now the only data point they have is what is our strategy and what's our impact goals to raise grants, and not really where our funding gap is. So you could overfund one program and underfund another program. And when things like that happen, you end up using your unrestricted funds for liquidity. And now you use up all your unrestricted dollars. And now you're left with a bunch of restricted asset on your balance sheet, which you're scrambling how to spend before it expires. And it's just this vicious cycle that nonprofits constantly find themselves in.
Yeah, is it fair to say that this is sort of like a really sophisticated version of budgeting in QuickBooks? And budgeting has always actually been a bit of a challenge, even if you just have a simple budget. It's not like that was the first thing that they thought of when they created QuickBooks.
Precisely. I think you said it really well.
Yeah, we'd love to see how you tackle this problem in the product. Let's dive into it.
Awesome. Let's do it. So I'm going to open the live app. Our first module that I want to show you is called the Fund Repository. And for our first 1 to 2 modules, it will feel very boring, but it's kind of like a little bit of the setup before the most exciting part comes in. And for a lot of nonprofits and accountants that serve nonprofits, this already could be quite exciting, because a lot of accountants go into nonprofits and like, oh, can you give me a list of all your grants? Where can I see all of them? It's like, oh, here's a Google Drive or some OneDrive folder of PDFs and spreadsheets. So these are all my grants, and people are often scrolling through them. And so
Don't
here you can.
underestimate our ability to be entertained by this. Like we love this.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So first, this becomes your single source of truth for all your grants in one place, and you can do basic things like sort and filter by different programs. So you could get a bird's eye view of all your grants. You can click into any of these grants. Okay, that happened. As demo lords are most likely never on your side. So give me 1 second
Yep.
as I fix that. Okay, there we go. We're back in again.
Awesome.
So you can see, once you click into a grant, you can see the most important information, like who's the donor, what's the funding type, amount, start date, expiration date. If it's multi-year grant, you can like have year 1, year 2, time-based milestones, budget. So this is like something very unique to nonprofits. Like each donor uses their own nomenclature for budget categories. So this table looks completely different. Like this donor differentiates between staff salaries and staff benefits. Another donor might just have one line called personnel, right? And so now what does that mean from like which accounts do these budget categories cover? So we created something called the account mapping table.
Oh,
where
so
it's
this
kind
means
of
I don't have to go into my QuickBooks GL chart of accounts and create all these sub accounts for every single grant. Now I can map them
Yep.
to like the same. I can map differently named budget amounts from different funds to the same GL account.
Precisely. We're trying to translate all of these budget categories to one uniform set of expense categories, which is your general ledger expense account. So this table, so for example, let's say donor says other direct cost, materials, and miscellaneous. Well, what does that mean? What does it cover, right? And so you could click in and you could see all the 7 accounts that this covers, and it's so simple to change. So if you're like, oh, I want travel to also be part of this, you could just come here, click travel, and check, and done. So it's literally as simple as that. You can also restrict these budget categories to specific employees by title, like case managers only, or this is specifically for Amy, because a lot of government grants want you to specify like who exactly are you going to use this money for. And not, for example, this is not going towards like finance or other administrative cost categories. And I just want to ensure that it's going to specific employees who are in the programs, translating the dollars to impact. And so you can set those restrictions as well. So what our algorithm now understands is that all of these budget categories are restricted to these specific accounts and these specific people. And you can not only set these restrictions at the budget category level, but you could also set the restrictions at the grant level.
And I imagine a lot of that mapping is just in people's heads at most nonprofits.
Totally. Yeah. So you can also like these restrictions, like, there's a program restriction. So the example I give is like, let's say you're a homeless shelter, you have different programs, like you have a temporary housing program, you have an awareness outreach program, you have like a permanent stability program. And so a lot of donors are specify that their dollars should be restricted to specific programs only. So here you have, I could say this grant is only for the main program. And we have a bunch of other restrictions you can restrict the grant to, like excluded expense categories, like a lot of federal grants say you cannot spend my money on food, alcohol, bad debt, marketing, fundraising. So you could add those accounts, match requirements, budget category variance, location restriction, recipient restriction. So basically you can configure all the different types of restrictions.
Tell me about that match. I'm curious about that match percentage you said. You've got that down?
Yeah, so basically a lot of donors have match requirements. Like they don't want to be the only sole provider for that particular program. So they'll be like, let's say 50% match means 50% of the dollars coming to that program must be coming from another donor. And so yeah, those are very common requirements as well.
And then you've got a minimum spend, and you can do that by time interval. So that's I get
Correct.
a grant. I get a grant, and I have to spend X% of it every year.
Right. Like what we've seen is like this is real, by the way. Some of the contracts they received is or grants they receive is like if it's a 1-year grant, every quarter I want you to spend 25%. Minimum. Like if you're not spending 25% per quarter, that means you're underspending and you're going on a trajectory where So put yourself in the donor's shoes. What the donor is thinking is, let's say I'm the California Department of Housing, and I have impact goals on how many, say, people who are struggling with homelessness need to be impacted with my dollars this year. Let's say I want 1,000 people is my impact goal. Now, if I see you that you're not spending fast enough, that you won't be able to hit that 1,000 people goal, and because of you, I'm going to miss, as a donor, I'm going to miss on my impact goals for the year. And so these are like different ways that the donors are placing controls. But what, and this is a very touchy topic in nonprofits. It's like, oh, I get the donor wants to put all these controls, but this creates an incredible amount of manual work for me as a nonprofit to ensure I'm hitting all these restrictions, which means I need more people in my administrative staff, like finance staff, to address all these restrictions and meet all these requirements. But at the same time, the donor is also enforcing, hey, you cannot spend more than 15% of my dollars towards administrative costs.
Right.
But you have to meet all of these requirements. And it's just like, how is this supposed to work?
It reduces the amount, and it reduces from the general fund the amount of money that you actually get to as a nonprofit spend on programs, because you're dealing with all this administrative overhead.
Right. And which is like, most of the donors that give to nonprofits are like, hey, for every dollar I donate, how many cents on the dollar are going towards admin versus direct program impact? And so nonprofits are measured and rated based on this. So yeah, it is one of the most touchy topics. And hopefully we can, what we're trying to do is like, okay, can software come in and help at the fraction of hiring a human? And that way we're able to check both boxes in a unique solution here. Yeah.
If you scroll up a little bit, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, we also have location restrictions, and then the other one at the bottom was recipient restrictions as well.
Correct.
So all these restrictions, if you scroll up, is this all tied to the one grant, or is it tied to these individual budget categories?
Right. So these restrictions are all at the grant level, and the only restrictions that are at the budget level are the ones I showed you, which is
the chart of accounts,
the accounts and the employees. Yeah. Correct.
Understand.
Right. And so we basically, you have all of these grants, like if I go back, if I go back to the account mapping slide, and what we did is like, it's so hard for me to move between grants. So we created this like sort of tracker where you can just move between grants. And if I move to the next grant, for example, the budget categories look completely different, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and the restrictions look completely different. So essentially this becomes your single source of truth for all grants and restrictions in one place. But we didn't stop there. We also added this functionality to track your reporting deadlines, because a lot of these grants are billable grants. And what that means is they're reimbursable. You spend first and you then ask for reimbursement. So you have to send these invoices out to the donors. This could be accompanied by some quarterly impact tracking reports. And so you can add all the different types of reports. You can say, okay, if you just click and you can mark this as done or mark this as not done. You could attach all your documents in one place. You can track your impact metrics, like number of children served, what's the goal, where we currently stand. And I'll show you in a bit how you can see all of these information aggregated across all the different grants all in one place.
That's fantastic, because most nonprofits are tracking all those reporting requirements in a totally different system, but you've integrated it here into the budget.
Right, totally. And yeah, this is the goal. There is a spreadsheet for everything of what I just showed you. Like every report is a spreadsheet for every donor. Like every grant agreement is its own spreadsheet. And it's just an absolute nightmare. And you'll see some of the other features, but this is just the baseline foundation of all your money in, which is your grant revenue.
Got it. Single source of truth for all our grants.
Exactly. Yeah. I want to move to this section called the expense actuals. So over here, you can see a list of all your grants, all your expenses that are, let's say in this case, QuickBooks. We integrate with QuickBooks very well. And so we pretty much pull all your expenses. Now, let's say I have a dummy QuickBooks account open here, and you can see I'm tracking like program in my class field and the grant in my customer field. This is the most typical setup of most nonprofits. And so I have these expenses. You could see a lot of the expenses are unallocated. to the grants. And so we basically pull them out. But now let's say for here, for example, this expense for $200.61. Let's go find that in QuickBooks. It's $200.61 tagged to the City of Oakland grant. If I go back here, that same expense, you can see that we're throwing an error saying that this is probably breaking some sort of program restriction. So for example, this is tagged to the secondary program. If I open the City of Oakland grant, you can see that's tagged to the main program. So that's one thing already that where we can start doing as QuickBooks. Like you could filter immediately for expenses that need attention. So like 2 expenses need attention, they're breaking some form of restriction. So
okay,
that's
there's 2 programs for the City of Oakland, and we in the GL have coded it to the wrong program, is what this is highlighting, and now we can go address this.
It is in fact something slightly different. Like this expense was for so what happens today is I have this expense, right, that was coded to the secondary program. This actually happens to be accurate, but someone didn't know that the City of Oakland doesn't support the secondary program, so they put it on the City of Oakland grant. And the risk of this is that if you don't fix these errors, then the donor catches it or an auditor catches it in their audit, and now you have to give that $200 back to the donor.
Got it. So it's the wrong donor for this program. So got it.
Wrong grant. Yes.
Wrong grant.
Yeah.
So that table on the other screen in KarmaSuite, essentially it's a table like in, other apps have this as uncategorized transactions, but it's more than that because you're also detecting transactions that are in violations or potential violations to fix.
Exactly. And one of the, like we catch a bunch of different types of errors, right? Like if you're ever breaking program restriction or employee restriction or date restriction, like what happens a lot of the times is the grant has expired, but someone is still allocating expenses to the grant because they are not aware that the grant expired. And one of the cool features we want to try out early next year, is to add something like AI-based restrictions where you can prompt in like what kind of restrictions you want uniquely detected. So for example, like let's say alcohol is not allowed. And so even if the word, any word like margaritas appears in the description of an expense, that is alcohol. And AI can do a much better job at catching those nuances, right? And hopefully we can take all of the guidance that the federal government has and convert it into AI prompts, and just throw it in there and make AI do the work of catching every restriction out there. So we're really excited about what AI can do here in terms of ensuring compliance.
And then as I fix things here, you're sending it back to QuickBooks then.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that in a second. Yeah. But yeah, so we get all the money out. So basically I wanted to set the stage on fund repository has the money in, expense actuals has all the money out. And now sorts of the fun part of the app begin, which is how am I doing on all of my grants? Am I spending them fast enough or not is a huge topic. So one of the nuances also is like none of these grants line up with your fiscal year neatly, by the way. Like some grants start in the middle of the year, latter part of the year. So you could track all your start dates and end dates for each of these grants. And you could scroll through and see all your grants neatly organized in one screen. The bigger screen you have, the better this looks. And you can see the burn rate, like, am I spending fast enough? So for example, like this particular grant over here, it's telling me that 94% of the time is fast, but 42% of the dollars have been spent. So I'm underspending this grant. And then you can see where do I have money left. So I have 140K left. So budget spend remaining. And I can see, okay, I have 68K left in payroll, wages, and salaries. For payroll taxes, I have 13K left. You can click into any of these numbers to see a list of all your expenses. And we're pulling all of this from QuickBooks. All the budget categories. Where am I getting my 1.3 million in payroll from? You could see a list of all the budget categories and the grants that add up to that 1.3 million. To make this super clickable and easy to use, if you want to just track what are my grants that I'm underspending, just toggle this on and it automatically filters for the 3 grants that you're underspending. Another very common use case is, say, I am the program director. So as I mentioned, the different programs, they're kind of like business units as an analogy for for-profits. So I can come here, I'm the program director of the main program. I only care about the main program. I can just select that and automatically filter for the grants that support the main program. And now here's the unique part. I can see my total budget, total spend, and total remaining for my entire program. Previously, like either there's 2 suboptimal alternatives. One is the program folks are pretty much flying blind. on like where do I have money left, or second is finance has to put together custom spreadsheets on where the money is left. So if like as new grants come in or grants die out, spending patterns change, these spreadsheets are manually uploaded and shared via email. So now it's just automatically updated, neatly organized in one place. So let me pause here. Any thoughts or questions?
I can see how this would get really complicated where you have like a main program, and the example you gave is a homeless shelter. And then we have multiple donors that have given us grants to fund that program. And on the screen, we can see the total budget, what's remaining, what's spent, what's remaining. And then we can see it for each of the donors, each of the grants.
Yes.
And like, that is, this is a beautiful thing. I just want to say.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, this sounds like so basic and straightforward that like I would expect most nonprofits to have this information in an easy way. And especially when like, and I'm going to start migrating towards workflows, right? Like I have to now allocate expenses for this month as I close my books. The first piece of information I need is how much is left in each grant so that I could then determine like, and then if, and what are the restrictions of these grants? So then I can determine which expense can go towards which grants. Like this is the baseline foundational information, which most nonprofits don't have handy. But let's take an example. Let's say I'm the program manager for the main program and I have a travel expense. So I can scroll down, you can see travel. I can see this grant has a budget for travel. This other grant has a budget for travel. And this grant doesn't have a budget for travel. So now let's say, okay, which of these two grants do I put that expense on? And maybe I scroll up and I see, I'm underspending this grant. So maybe I should put it on this grant. Now, still, this is very hard and complex for a non-finance savvy user to use. So we made this super simple. We create something called the spending assistant. So if I go here, I can pick that main program and let's pick that travel category we were looking at. Let's say it's $1,000. There we go. In a split second, we tell you here are the two valid funding options that you have. And remember that third grant doesn't show up here because it doesn't have any budget for travel. And then you could see here, we're recommending the City of Oakland grant because City of Oakland grant has more money and expires before this other grant. So you want to allocate that expense to this particular grant, right? It's so the use cases are, let's say I'm a bill pay person and I pay bills every week. How do I know which expense to code it to? Or I'm a program person and I use my P card to make all these purchases. Finance typically puts the burden on programs saying like, hey, you spent the expense. I don't understand the context of this expense. So you go allocate. So now these program folks are like, I don't know what grants we have and I don't know what grant restrictions they have. So I'm just going to pick and choose based on some training or memory I have of this grant and the either wrong or suboptimal. And so the one other use case is, let's say I
change that. Like, what if the amount I typed in here was $15,000? I just want to see how am I going to be told, sorry, you can't do this, there's no funds?
Let's try. Okay, it's saying basically use both and use a mix of this, but looks like it can't cover the whole expense. So I guess a user can interpret that, but yeah.
You can see that, you can see that right there that, okay, well, here's how much I have from each of these funds.
Yeah, it's obvious it's not 15,000.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. But good point. Maybe we could say something
what if you show general
or something?
What if you have that show general operating?
Yeah. So basically, if I do that, then I see the Sir Gabriel Family Foundation grant. Basically, I don't know how familiar you are or the audience is with general operating grants, but essentially these are typically foundations that are like, okay, I understand running a nonprofit is really challenging, so I'm going to put my faith in you, and I'm not going to put all these restrictions. So the general operating grants are pretty much unrestricted and are very, very precious. Like you could see, they don't have an expiration date, so you don't have that clock on you that you have to spend this money.
So then, if you put in the 15,000 amount, right, would it recommend to spend some of that from the general operating or from the?
I love it. I like it. You're testing. There we go.
There we go.
Like that. Yeah.
We just need a total button. We need a total at the bottom of the allocation.
I imagine like this is one of the most important features or problems that somebody running a nonprofit goes through every day. Can we buy this? Can we spend this? Can we spend this? And the answer probably like, I don't know. Give me 2 weeks.
Yeah,
It's
or
Right,
instant.
exactly.
go ask the CFO or the VP of finance, who then has to like
There we go.
spend a bunch of time figuring it out.
Right.
Yeah.
So now I
This
have
is
a bunch of
impressive.
emails and meetings that I have to attend to as a finance director, where I have to answer questions like, do I have enough money to make this purchase, or how do I allocate this expense?
That's amazing. And is this spending assistant a tool that like we could give access to those program managers, or is this just for
Right.
the?
So one of the exceptions we made is that every other module we limit to the number of seats you buy, but spending assistant, we give away unlimited number of seats. So
Amazing.
everybody in your organization should be able to come and like allocate precisely, because because the reason why we did that primarily is because if we don't do this, then finance team ends up with a huge amount of work at the end of the month to manually allocate these expenses or reclass them as they close their books. So we want to make it easier for the finance folks.
That is so great. I'm so glad you did that with your pricing.
And what does
Yeah.
the download available funds button do?
A lot of the times people just want to download these available funds, so it's just a download button. Probably could
Like,
make it smaller and just hide
What
it
is
here.
it? What does it give you though? Like, what's the output?
Oh, it's just like a CSV file of whatever you're seeing here.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you can then go
So,
put that into
like-
whatever spreadsheet.
Right. Like a lot of times what customers want to do is they, like, for example, they want to, like, payroll, for example, they want to see all the money they have for payroll, and they want to use some preset allocations in their payroll system and split those. But I don't recommend using this for that. I think we have a better answer for that, which I'll get to in a second, but let's keep moving. So one other use case I wanted to show you is, like, let's say I pick a random account. It says like insufficient funds for this expense. So this prevents overspending on certain budget categories, or at least, like, like go get an approval from one of your program directors or finance folks to say, can I use unrestricted dollars to make this purchase, right? So we help you prevent overspending and underspending. But so spending assistant basically does one expense at a time, right? But what if it's the end of the month and I have 100 expenses that are not allocated to any grants in my general ledger, and someone in financial programs has to go manually and do that. So we created something called the fund coder. So here I can hit this button, import expense actuals. Hopefully the demo logs are on my side. I need more time. So let's go back to QuickBooks. But essentially what Fund Coder is doing, it's pulling all the expenses from your QuickBooks account and analyze, and it converts all the grant restrictions to mathematical equations, and is understanding the context of each expense and determining what are the eligible funding options for each of these, and picking one as a recommendation. So if I go back to Fund Coder, let's see.
So we are gonna pull the transactions where a grant has not been assigned, and we are going to use your
Correct.
tool to then assign the appropriate grant based on all the restrictions that we have created in that earlier screen.
Exactly. That's the ambition here. And I don't know if my give me 1 second as I try to do this. Typically,
this is the beauty of live demos, is that
I know, right? I'm like, it always works, except it chooses to not work when I need it the most. Let me see if I can pull up an older Fund Coder run. Nope, it will not load.
Now, does this?
Okay,
there we
go. I think it kind of loaded. Yeah.
Now when that happens, anyone who uses an add-on to QuickBooks has experienced this. It's because you're syncing the GL data from QuickBooks into your app, and that can be a lot of transactions.
It's a lot of transactions for sure. I think we've been having a few upstream provider issues today, so there's something going on. But at least this should give you a past Fund Coder run, should give you a taste of what we do here. But essentially, we pull all your expenses, and we are then able to do exactly what Spending Assistant did. Like, for example, like this lodging hotels expense. This is the grant we're recommending. Like, so this is the current fund allocation is blank. The proposed fund allocation is this. We're saying put it on the City of Oakland grant. You don't like it, you can click and you can see all the other funding options, just like
so you're
Spending
suggesting
Assistant.
All of these funds and budget categories. That's what those purple
Correct.
circles are.
Yes,
So,
everything that's a purple circle is us, our algorithm making.
So this is sort of like in QuickBooks when I get new transactions in from the bank feed, I get that suggestion
Yes.
of here's the
Yes.
category that you should assign
Yeah.
this to. And you're doing this now after the
For the grant.
transactions in the GL for the grant.
Exactly. So we need all of this pre-populated, like which account does that expense belong to? What was the date of the expense? Which program or class in QuickBooks does that belong to? And once you do that, then all we do is help with the fund allocation piece. And so one of the most requested features we have right now is, hey, can you help us do the program allocation piece as well, which we plan to do early next year. So if I have an employee, how does that employee's time splits between different programs that I have? And then once each split has happened across different programs, today we then take each split and then allocate it to a grant. But a lot of customers are like, this is already great. And the reason why we did that narrowly is because we wanted to start with the hardest problem to solve, which is the fund allocation. Like once we split an expense into different programs, now each program is supported by multiple grants, and I have to understand the nuance of every grant. And that is really, really complex versus this employee always splits his time 60-40 between these two programs. That's kind of easy to do. It's just a little more manual and tedious, but our goal is to automate that as well.
So someday in the future, I could set up a rule in QuickBooks that just codes everything that comes in from the bank feed to like a single account. And then I could use KarmaSuite to do all of the program coding and the fund coding in this way.
Yeah,
that's the vision.
I think and narrowing that scope down even more, the biggest expense for every nonprofit is payroll. Like roughly 70 to 80% is payroll. And so we want to get data from the payroll system, allocated, and I think you can set the payroll system to allocated to specific accounts, and then we get that information. Then we break that each
Even
expense into
further.
splits to programs, and then we use FundCoder to do the grants, and then we make the journal entry to QuickBooks. So we kind of want to be pre-GL. Right now we're post-GL, and we want to start doing that for everything, whether it's bill pay, payroll, any expense. We want to be pre-GL, and that, like, the fact that I can just watch KarmaSuite move my data from payroll to QuickBooks and do all the allocations is just, I'm sure some of the audience will tear up if we have that feature.
That's great. So that's on the roadmap.
Yes, that's on the roadmap. The one other feature I wanted to show you is from the reporting standpoint.
Sorry, before you move on, can we just go back to that screen?
Sure.
So basically,
Absolutely.
like if I like the fund suggestion and the budget category suggestion, I can just accept these?
Yes. So you could accept these, and once I hit accept, it shows this button, say shift to GL, and today my demo logs are not with me. And then it right back straight. So I'll try once more if I am able to pull.
It's all right. We get the idea.
Expenses.
So basically,
We believe you.
I accept it, and then I push the changes to QuickBooks, and then KarmaSuite goes in and tags all those transactions appropriately.
Exactly. I think this should work now. Let's see. This expense, that $200.61, that was breaking a program restriction. Let's see. Let's accept it, and let's write this back to the GL. And fingers crossed it works. It normally works flawlessly. So if I go back here, this one expense is tagged to City of Oakland. We changed it from City of Oakland to HRTP. So if I go ahead and refresh this page, there we go, changed to HRTP. So it worked. Thank you, demo lords. And what happens is this automatically disappears from, so because of the status filter, you can bring it back, and then you could see all of this. So what my customers do is they basically come in and they're like, oh, let me just accept all lodging expense. I have to check with someone in programs. I'm not going to do that. This expense changes to Sergey Brin Foundation. Everything else looked good. Accept it, bulk write everything back to the GL. Done. My monthly close becomes so much faster, so much easier. And more importantly, our algorithm is designed to squeeze every grant to the maximum extent possible while being compliant to grant restrictions. And so one of my customers put it to a test for like the last 3 months, and they found $30,000 more that were tagged to unrestricted dollars that they could now put on restricted grants. So that it's not just the time that's saved and the manual labor that's saved, it's also the unrestricted dollars that are protected.
That's amazing. So
Yep.
what else should we look at in the time we've got left?
Yeah. I want to show you what
Actually,
reporting looks like now.
yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
want to see the reporting, right? Because that's the super burdensome
Yeah.
thing. Is like now I got to
Exactly.
report on a quarterly basis or whatever to all of these different grants to stay compliant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the first and main problem with reporting is that each donor doesn't care about your general ledger account structure. They only care about the budget categories they defined in the grant agreement. So, which means if you have to pull a report today, what do? You go to QuickBooks, you pull a transaction report, and then you manually map those accounts to the specific budget categories of each donor in a custom spreadsheet for each grant. And you do this every month or every quarter based on the reporting needs. So essentially, we created this feature called Funds Remaining by Fund, where you could see the budget spent and remaining, not by your account structure, but by your specific categories defined by the donor, and you could see the burn rate as well. So like you could say 43% of the time has passed, 44% of the dollars have been spent. This could look very misleadingly great. Like I'm doing a great job, but actually you're not. You're underspending on certain budget categories and you're overspending on some other budget categories. So you might want to go get that budget modification with the donor or talk to your program teams and say like, hey, is there any way we can make up for the spend over here? You could also click into this calendar button. And now you can see, for example, here, like month by month spending patterns of this. And so you could see here, like, I don't have too much dummy data in this account, but you can assume all of these will be populated with your QuickBooks data. So for example, if I have to report for the month of September, I literally just come here, hit download, get my September numbers, and I'm done. No more downloading QuickBooks data and transforming it. And if I were to do this for another grant, I literally hit the next arrow or pick the grant that I want, and the budget categories look completely different. My reporting is done like in a few clicks per grant.
Instead of me downloading this and mailing it to the board or whoever, is there a way to give view-only access or invite people to view the reports inside of KarmaSuite?
Yeah, we have permissions in our settings where you can set view-only access for specific users.
That's amazing. So I could invite a user and give them access to view that grant and the spending, and now they have an up-to-date report at any time.
Anytime.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And one of the, so if you remember, I told you a lot of these grants are billable grants, which means I have to send an invoice, right? So imagine now if I wanted to send the invoice for September, and I could click a button here and that automatically opens QuickBooks with the donor details specified, the budget categories filled out, and I click a button to send that invoice. That sort of is on our roadmap to make that even more simpler.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And the one last thing I want to show you on the reporting side is we have this feature called like due dates. Essentially, all the grant tracking, all the reporting deadline tracking, you can see all of them neatly organized in one place. If you don't like the calendar view, you can switch to a tabular view, and you can see what are all the upcoming deadlines and assign owners to them and project manage it from here. I mean, it's not as sophisticated as Asana, but I think this is what like the bare minimum that our customer wanted. Like, I don't need more sophistication than this. So what we're trying to be is that single point solution for grants. Like if you think grants, any workflow with grants, just come to KarmaSuite and you can figure it out very quickly.
This is
We've
amazing.
got this is really incredible. I can't imagine if I were in finance at a nonprofit doing it any other way, honestly. And go for it,
I'm amazed
David.
that it's taken like 20 years for something like this to exist. I feel like most nonprofit software that's ever existed or I've seen on the market, it's always about getting donations.
Right.
It's about donation management, and the bookkeeping was always like a second thought. And this is
right.
Like the hours and hours, millions of hours to do this work is gone now. It's really amazing. Congratulations.
We have a question from one of our live stream viewers, Tino. Welcome, Tino. Tino wants to know what kind of certifications does KarmaSuite have? Do you have a SOC 2, for instance? You know, what do you got?
We're compliant. We don't have the SOC 2 certification yet, even though if that's important for you all, like we can go get that really quickly. But we have all the best practices that we follow in terms of like security standards, etc. And our CTO takes real pride in that. So I'm happy to connect you with the right folks at our team to ensure you have the confidence you need.
Awesome. Tell us about your customers, right? Who is using KarmaSuite? Who is this a really good fit for?
Yeah, our customers typically are nonprofits with at least 1 million in revenue. Our smallest customer is 1 million in revenue. Our largest customer is 30 million in revenue. And our customers include the likes of United Way chapters, like United Way Austin, United Way Salt Lake City. Our customers we're across the country and growing. And ideally, our customer has at least 5 grants. If you have less than 5 grants, you can kind of make do with spreadsheets, to be honest. And at least 25% of the revenue comes from grants, especially for anything less than 30 million. Anything over 30 million, even a lesser percentage of revenue coming from grants, could add up to a significant amount of grants. And so, yeah, that's typically our ideal customer profile.
And how does KarmaSuite make money? Like, how do you charge nonprofits? I think you said it's per seat pricing.
Yeah, we do annual subscriptions, and we price based on number of seats, the number of grants you have, complexity it takes to onboard you. And as I mentioned, we give away unlimited licenses for Spending Assistant, so that's at no cost.
So what if I'm an accounting firm? Do you have like a partner program? How would I roll this out to use for my clients?
Totally. So we actually partner with multiple accounting firms right now who are so excited for their customers to use KarmaSuite because it makes their life easy. There's this mismatch of expectation between nonprofits and accounting firms. Let's say I'm a nonprofit ED struggling with all of these grants, and I hire an accounting firm, and I'm like, make all my problems go away. And the accounting firm is like, I'm not well versed with your grants. I don't know how to pull reports. I can't figure out how to allocate which expense goes to which grant because I don't have the context of each expense. Someone in programs does, and I'm not a full-time staff in your nonprofit for me to have that level of depth and understanding and the detail. And so then the EDs and other leaders in nonprofits are disappointed with the extent to which accounting firms are able to add value, and accounting firms are disappointed because they're like, I don't want to do all this manual work. Like, I want to be more like in a strategic advisory role or helping, another better way. And so we help bridge that mismatch. And so accounting firms are really excited about us, including one of the largest accounting firms that serves nonprofits we're in talks with. And so we help set that mismatch. But apart from that, for every accounting firm that brings a customer to us, we do a small rev share. But more importantly, we give 2 seats per customer to the accounting firm at no additional cost. So the accounting firm is not eating into the seats of the subscription that's paid by the nonprofit. So that's our partner program so far with the accounting firms.
Fantastic.
I noticed you add a little gear for preferences. Is there anything you've talked about, different roles that you can assign to people and invite people, but what other preferences do you have hidden in there that maybe we didn't speak about yet?
Let's look at those. So on the settings side and permissions, so for example, you can see you have a paid seat versus Spending Assistant only seat. You can edit pages and or view pages. And the last one that is super important for a lot of customers is who can view payroll data versus not. So we literally hash out the numbers on every payroll related line. And so they won't be able to see that. One of the other requests we get is like, hey, can you control view access by which program that person is part of? And I think that's still in the works. But yeah, those are at a high level of permissions.
Got it. Well, is there anything else, Srikar, that we should know before we go?
So we touched upon these 2 buckets of pain points, right? Like the allocations, the reportings, the overspending, underspending, and etc. We didn't touch upon the feature set that does forecasting your funding gap and excess. And so maybe I'll give you a quick teaser of that. And if anyone is interested, you can always book a demo with me and I can do that in detail. But in interest of time, I'll move really fast on this module. But essentially, when I'm budgeting and forecasting, most nonprofits start with a spreadsheet that kind of looks like this. This is all my employees. This is their salary. This is their fringe. And this is the total cost. And let's say John Doe costs $75K. And then I take John Doe's salary of $75K and split it 60-40. across like these two separate programs, right? And this is sort of the starting point, and this is the program allocation piece that we take from the customer, and then we do the fund allocation, and we're able to generate a view that's incredibly amazing and looks like this. And so you could see a list of all your programs and other non-programmatic cost centers, and you can see what your funding gap is in red. You can see your funding excess that's going to expire in yellow, and your funding excess that's not going to expire in white. So it's not as dangerous as the yellow cell. And you can wonder, like, how can I have a gap and excess at the same time on a program? And you can click into that. And here you can see, for example, I have a gap in John Doe salary and supplies, travel, and I have an excess in equipment. And this is, again, going back to my point on like how in nonprofit world, revenue is restricted and doesn't line up exactly with how you plan to spend your money. Especially as, like, you know, there's even the whole game of odds involved, right? Like, I'm applying for 10 grants, like maybe like I'll only win 5, maybe I'll only win 3. And so you never really know like how you're doing from a funding gap or excess standpoint. And you can then wonder, how did KarmaSuite figure this out? How did KarmaSuite know that I had a 300K in excess in equipment and a gap in these categories? If I move from the summary view to the fund allocation view, here you can see again in our purple pills, our allocation engine coming back and saying, okay, let's take John Doe, for example. John Doe cost 100,000. It was able to put 42K on the Department of Housing, and let's say it wasn't able to put anything on the Ford Foundation grant because let's say John Doe happens to be a junior specialist and the Ford Foundation only supports senior specialists. So it takes into consideration all of those restrictions. And so that's how you have a 58K gap. You can even click in and you can see this month by month view split of John Doe's salary. So behind the scenes, we basically allocate these month by month splits. And that's how you can see at some point, for example, this grant runs out of money. And then all of it becomes a funding gap. So that's how we're able to calculate your funding gap. And our customers love this because now, like, by the way, doing month by month allocations of each expense, like for a human to do that might take weeks in a spreadsheet, but for an algorithm, it takes seconds. And so our customers love this because they take this information and they go to the fundraising team and be like, please stop raising more money for equipment on this category. We don't need it. Go raise money for supplies, travel, or John Doe salary. Or you could get a budget modification and move this 300K to supplies. Or, hey, maybe we cannot go to that conference that we go to usually because we have a huge travel cap this time. And so we are giving you the power to make those strategic decisions and taking away all of the manual work and the putting data together across, or just assuming numbers in spreadsheets on like, oh, my revenue minus costs equals 0, so I'm okay for this year as a nonprofit.
And this is super valuable information for the people who are raising the money at your nonprofit because they can go to a donor and get those modifications because they have data. It's not just, here we are again asking for more money. Here is the specific purpose. This is the reason why. You know, you gave us all this money for equipment, but really, in order to make this program successful, we need it for salaries. So can you adjust that for us?
Exactly. Precisely.
That's great. Wow.
I'll stop the demo here, but the teaser I'll leave the audience with is we have recommendations such as like, hey, go get a budget modification or modify this person's program allocation and things like that. Assume different things like, oh, what if I win these grants in this scenario? What is my funding gap going to look like, etc. And then you can compare those scenarios. And like a very common use case is a board member says like, oh, I just spoke to the county department and they can give us $1 million grant if we open a new location here in that county. Like, can we do that? Like previously, it's like, I have to get back to you in a few weeks. And now you could just come in here, add a bunch of expenses for that new location, add that pending grant from the county, create a scenario, run the allocations engine, and see your funding gap and compare those two scenarios. Literally, you could do that in the board meeting itself and answer those questions. Or you want to create a base case, like what if I win only 30% of my grants, or best case, what if I win 70% of my grants? Like, what is my funding gap and excess going to look like? You can model out all these scenarios and make sure your organization is resilient, no matter the financial situation you encounter.
So, Srikar, I am working with nonprofits, and I am really interested in learning more about KarmaSuite, seeing it, talking to your team. Where do I go?
Go to our website. There is a Calendly link there to book a demo. We would love for you to chat with you. Each nonprofit is so nuanced. One other thing I forgot to mention is we integrate with multiple general ledgers, QuickBooks, NetSuite, and Sage. We have MIP and Blackbaud on our roadmap working on right now. So yeah, like the capabilities vary based on which general ledger you use. The nuances vary based on what kind of restricted funding you have. So let's have a conversation. Go to our website, set up some time, and would love to chat with you.
And that site is KarmaSuiteSoftware.com. Stay tuned for a brief message about how to earn continuing professional education for attending today's Earmark Expo, and we hope to see you again soon. Today's event has ended. To earn CPE, go to earmark.app or scan the QR code on the screen. Then log in or create your free account. Search for the course by tapping on the magnifying glass icon on the home screen and then entering the name of this event. It takes a few days to make the course, so if you're attending this event live, keep an eye out for an email letting you know when the course is available. Pass the quiz to earn your CPE, then tap the button to email yourself a certificate. Stay tuned for more events from Earmark. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.